The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sound cutting through my stepmother's performative sobbing. She thought she was minutes away from inheriting an empire, but the manila folder in my hands proved she was actually millions in debt to dangerous people. My name is Avery Adams, and I was the only thing standing between my father's legacy and the woman who had spent the last decade trying to erase me from it. I sat in the stiff vinyl recliner in the corner of the VIP hospital suite, my hands resting on the cool surface of the folder. It felt heavy, not just with paper, but with the weight of the truth I had spent months unearthing. Across the room, draped over my father's legs like a grieving widow from a Gothic novel, was Avery Ramirez. Yes, she shared my first name. It was a cruel coincidence that she had weaponized from the moment she entered our lives. She loved the confusion it caused. She loved answering the phone and pretending to be his daughter, or signing documents as Avery A. after she took my father's name, though legally she had kept her own for professional reasons. In her mind, there was only room for one Avery in David Adams' life, and she had done a thorough job of ensuring it was her. But today, looking at her faux silk handkerchief dabbing at dry eyes, I knew her reign was ending. My father, David, looked small in the hospital bed. The man who had built Adams Logistics from a single truck into a national shipping titan was now reduced to wires, tubes, and the shallow rise and fall of a chest that was giving up the fight. The doctors had been clear 3 hours ago. It was a matter of time. The stroke had been massive. There would be no recovery, only a transition. "Oh, David," Ramirez wailed, her voice pitching up just enough to be heard in the hallway. She looked over her shoulder to ensure the door was ajar. "What will I do without you? How will I manage everything alone?" I tightened my grip on the folder. "You won't have to manage anything alone, Ramirez," I said, my voice low and steady, "because you won't be here." She stopped crying instantly. The transformation was terrifyingly seamless. She straightened her spine, her face shifting from tragic grief to cold annoyance. She wiped her face, revealing makeup that hadn't run at all. "Excuse me," she hissed, keeping her voice down so as not to disturb the nurses, though she cared little for my father's peace. "This is the time for family, Avery. If you can't be supportive, you can leave. In fact, I think it's best if you do. David doesn't need your negative energy while he's transitioning." "I'm not going anywhere," I replied, "but you are, and you're going to do it quietly or you're going to leave in handcuffs. Your choice." The air in the room grew stagnant. The hum of the air conditioning seemed to vanish, leaving only the beep, beep, beep of my father's heart, counting down the seconds of his life. "You have always been a jealous, petty child," Ramirez spat, standing up and smoothing her black dress. She walked toward me, her heels clicking aggressively on the linoleum. "You think because you're his blood you own him? He chose me, he married me, and in a few hours, everything he built, this entire legacy you worship, will be mine. The house, the accounts, the company. Lawyer White has the will, it's ironclad." "The will leaves everything to his beloved wife," I quoted, assuming his beloved wife hasn't embezzled $3 million from the company accounts to pay off gambling debts in Macau and Las Vegas. She froze. It was a minute reaction, a slight twitch of her left eye, but I saw it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, though her voice had lost its imperious edge. "I think you do," I said, opening the folder. "I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, and I think you know who the Red Dragon Syndicate is." This was the culmination of 5 years of misery. To understand the satisfaction coursing through my veins in that stale room, you have to understand what she did to us. When my mother died, my father was broken. He was a genius at logistics, at moving goods from point A to point B, but he had no map for grief. He was vulnerable. Ramirez had been a consultant brought in to modernize our HR department. She was younger, vibrant, and shark-like in her ambition. She saw a wounded lion and didn't see a patient to heal. She saw a carcass to feast on. She isolated him slowly. First, it was subtle. Avery is busy with college, David. Don't bother her. Then it was manipulative. Avery asked for money again, David. I handled it, but she really needs to learn responsibility. I had never asked for money. I was working 2 jobs to put myself through grad school because she had convinced him to cut my tuition support to build my character. By the time I realized what was happening, I was the black sheep of a family of 3. She had moved into the manor, redecorated my mother's sanctuary with gaudy, modern art, and placed a wedge between my father and me that was made of lies and forged misunderstandings. But her greed was her undoing. She liked money, but she loved the thrill of risking it even more. I looked at the door as it pushed open. Jacob Brooks walked in. Jacob was my father's oldest friend's son and the current chief financial officer of Adams Logistics. He was 35, sharp-suited, and carried an air of calm authority that Ramirez hated because she couldn't seduce or intimidate him. "Jacob," Ramirez said, her smile straining, "now isn't a good time. Avery is being hysterical. We need security to escort her out." Jacob didn't look at her. He looked at me, then at my father. He walked to the bedside, placed a hand gently on my father's shoulder, and bowed his head for a moment. When he turned to Ramirez, his face was stone. "Avery isn't leaving, Mrs. Ramirez," Jacob said, "and security won't be coming for her. I've just finished the audit you tried to block last month." "That audit was unnecessary," she snapped. "I told you, as the wife of the CEO, I have discretionary spending privileges." "Discretionary spending covers dinners and charity galas," Jacob said, pulling a second folder from his briefcase. "It doesn't cover wire transfers to shell companies in the Caymans that bounce directly to casinos in Monte Carlo. We found the second set of books, Ramirez." Ramirez backed up, hitting the tray cable. The plastic pitcher of water wobbled, but didn't fall. "You have no authority," she snarled. "David is still the owner." "David is incapacitated," I said, finally standing up. My legs felt shaky, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the kill. "Which triggers the competency clause in the company bylaws. Power of attorney falls to the next of kin. That would be you, normally, unless there is evidence of malfeasance against the estate." "You can't prove anything," she whispered. "We don't have to prove it in court to ruin you," I said. "I have the proof right here, but more importantly, I have a list of the people you owe money to. Big Sal in Atlantic City, the aggressive gentleman from the underground poker ring in Chicago." Her face went pale. The blood drained out of her cheeks so fast she looked like the one dying. "They think you're paying them next week," I continued, stepping closer. "They think you're inheriting $50 million. But if this goes to probate, if there's a legal battle, all the assets freeze. For years. And those people, they aren't the type to wait for the court system, are they?" "What do you want?" she asked. Her voice was trembling now. The mask was completely gone. "I want my father to die in peace," I said, "and I want his legacy clean." I gestured to the door. "Mr. White is waiting in the hallway." Mr. White was our family attorney. He was an older man, a relic of the era when a handshake meant something. He had been sidelined by Ramirez for years, but he had never abandoned his loyalty to my father. He walked in now, carrying a leather portfolio. He looked at Ramirez with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Good evening, Mrs. Ramirez," White said formally. "You set me up," she accused, looking between the 3 of us. "This is an ambush." "This is an intervention," Jacob corrected, "for the company's sake." "Here is the deal," I said, laying it out plainly. "The folder in my hand contains proof of embezzlement, fraud, and illegal gambling debts totaling $4 million. If I hand this to the police, you go to prison. If I hand it to the press, you are humiliated. If I hand it to the executor, the assets freeze and your creditors come looking for you." She swallowed hard. "And the alternative?" "Mr. White has prepared a document," I said. "It is a post-nuptial addendum and a voluntary surrender of asset claims. You sign it, you waive your right to the company, the house, and the life insurance. In exchange, the estate agrees to pay off your current debts immediately upon his death, quietly, as a settlement. You walk away with nothing but your freedom and your life." She laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. You want me to walk away with nothing? I spent 10 years with that old man. You spent 10 years spending his money and isolating him from his daughter, I countered, my voice rising slightly. You are lucky I'm offering to pay your debts. I should let the sharks eat you alive. I won't sign it, she said, crossing her arms. I'll fight you. I'll drag his name through the mud. I'll tell the papers he was senile, that he abused me. And I will release the audio recording of you threatening him last week, Jacob interjected softly. Ramirez spun around. What? The baby monitor, Jacob said. The one you installed to monitor his breathing because you were too lazy to sit in the room with him? It records to the cloud. We heard you, Ramirez. We heard you tell him to hurry up and die. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. The beep of the monitor seemed to speed up, though I knew it was just my own pulse thundering in my ears. My father lay there, oblivious to the war being fought over his bones, but I liked to think that somewhere, deep in his subconscious, he knew we were fighting for him. Ramirez looked at the door. Then she looked at the window, 12 floors up. She was trapped. If I sign, she said, her voice hollow, you pay the debts? All of them? The ones in this folder, I said, tapping the manila cover. If you have more hidden, that's your problem, but this covers the 4 million. And I leave? Immediately, I said. You don't attend the funeral, you don't speak to the press, you disappear. If I see your face in this city again, I release the evidence to the district attorney. She looked at my father one last time. There was no love in her eyes. There wasn't even sadness. There was just calculation. She was calculating the odds, like she did at the roulette wheel. She realized the house had finally won. Give me the pen, she muttered. Mr. White stepped forward, placing the document on the rolling tray table. He handed her a heavy fountain pen, my father's favorite pen. She didn't even notice. Her hand shook as she signed. Avery Ramirez, the name she had stolen, the name she was now signing away. She signed 3 copies. Mr. White notarized them on the spot with his stamp. Done, she said, dropping the pen. Are you happy, Avery? I'm not happy, I said, looking at my dying father. I'm grieving, something you wouldn't understand. You're a fool, she sneered, grabbing her purse. He was miserable, you know. He missed you and he was miserable, and I enjoyed watching it. I felt the anger flare, white-hot, but Jacob's hand on my arm grounded me. Let her go, he murmured. She's trying to wound you on the way out. Get out, I said quietly. She turned and walked out of the hospital room. She didn't look back. She didn't say goodbye to the man she had married. She just marched toward the elevator, likely already planning her next con. When the door clicked shut, the tension in the room snapped. I slumped back into the chair, the exhaustion hitting me like a physical blow. Is it legally binding? I asked Mr. White, my voice cracking. Ironclad, Mr. White assured me, tucking the documents into his portfolio. She has surrendered all claims. The estate is yours, Avery. The company is safe. I don't care about the money, I whispered, reaching out to take my father's hand. His skin was papery and cool. I just wanted him back, even for a minute. Jacob pulled up a chair on the other side of the bed. You got him back, Avery. You saved his name. That's what matters. We sat there for hours. The sun began to set, painting the hospital room in hues of orange and purple. It was a beautiful, tragic light. Around 8 p.m., the rhythm of the heart monitor changed. It became erratic. The nurses came in, checking vitals, but they gave me a look that said, it's time. I leaned close to his ear. I didn't know if he could hear me, but I had to believe he could. She's gone, Dad, I whispered, tears finally spilling over. It's just us. It's just me. You're safe now. You don't have to worry anymore. I squeezed his hand. I felt a faint, almost imperceptible pressure in return. A goodbye. 10 minutes later, the beeping stopped. It was replaced by a singular, long tone that signaled the end of an era. The grief that washed over me was different than I expected. It wasn't the sharp, panic-induced grief of losing him to her manipulation. It was a clean, pure sorrow. It was the natural order of things. He was gone, but he had died as David Adams, my father, not as the victim of Avery Ramirez. The days that followed were a blur of logistics, ironically. Jacob handled the press, Mr. White handled the legal filings, I handled the funeral. We held the service at the old family chapel on the estate grounds. It was a crisp autumn day. The trees were shedding their leaves, covering the ground in gold and red. Hundreds of people came, employees, business partners, old friends who had been driven away by Ramirez, but returned now that she was gone. The absence of the widow was the talk of the event, of course. Jacob had released a carefully worded statement. Mrs. Ramirez has stepped away from public life to grieve privately and has respectfully declined to participate in the estate proceedings. It was a polite way of saying she took a payoff and ran. I stood at the podium to give the eulogy. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Mr. White in the front row, nodding encouragingly. I saw Jacob standing by the side, ever the sentinel. My father was a builder, I began, my voice echoing in the stone chapel. He built a company. He built a reputation, but mostly he tried to build a life where those he loved were safe. For a long time we were separated by circumstances and influences that sought to divide us, but in the end we found our way back to each other. I took a breath. David Adams leaves behind a legacy of integrity, and I intend to keep it that way. After the burial, there was a reception at the main house. It was strange walking through the doors. The house still smelled like her perfume, a cloying, expensive floral scent. I made a mental note to hire professional cleaners the next day. I wanted every trace of her scrubbed from the walls. Jacob found me in the library. This had been my father's favorite room before she turned it into a media center. I was looking at the empty spaces on the shelves where his first editions used to be. She had likely sold them. "How are you holding up?" Jacob asked, handing me a glass of scotch, my father's brand. "I'm okay," I said, taking a sip. The burn was grounding. "Did the wire transfer go through?" "It did," Jacob nodded. "The debts are paid. The Red Dragon representatives have been notified that the accounts are settled. She's in the clear." "Good," I said. "I don't want her killed, I just want her gone." "She's gone, Avery. Mr. White got a notification that she booked a one-way flight to Dubai this morning. She's looking for a new mark." "I pity the next man," I said. Jacob walked over to the window, looking out at the grounds. "The board is meeting on Monday. They want to know your intentions. With Ramirez out, you're the majority shareholder. You're the owner." I walked over to stand beside him. The sun was setting over the empire my father built. For years, I had run away from it, hating the money because it attracted people like Ramirez. But now, I saw it differently. It wasn't just money. It was his life's work. It was the jobs of 3,000 employees. It was the future. "I'm not selling," I said firmly. Jacob smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen on him in months. "I was hoping you'd say that. We have a lot of work to do. She made a mess of the logistics in the southern region. We'll fix it," I said. "And Jacob?" "Yeah? I want to start a foundation," I said, "for elder abuse awareness, for families who get cut off from their parents by predators." Jacob clinked his glass against mine. "We can do that." I looked around the room. It was going to take time to make this house a home again. I would have to bring back the old leather chairs. I would have to find the books. I would have to exorcise the ghost of the woman who shared my name. But as I stood there, listening to the quiet murmur of the guests in the other room, I realized that the silence wasn't oppressive anymore. The rhythmic beep of the monitor was gone. The shrill complaints of my stepmother were gone. There was just peace. I pulled the manila folder out of my bag, the one with the evidence, the one that had saved us. I walked over to the fireplace where a low fire was crackling. "What are you doing?" Jacob asked. "I don't need this anymore," I said. I tossed the folder into the flames. We watched as the paper curled and blackened. The lists of gambling debts, the photos of her with loan sharks, the bank statements showing the theft. It all turned to ash. It was over. "My name is Avery Adams," I said to the empty room, reclaiming the syllables that had been stolen from me, "and I'm finally home." The weeks that followed the funeral were a study in restoration. I hadn't realized how deep the rot had gone until we started peeling back the layers. Jacob and I practically lived in the corporate offices of Adams Logistics for the first month. The employees were wary at first. They had spent the last few years watching the company's culture erode under the influence of Ramirez's cost-cutting measures that usually involved cutting benefits while she renovated the executive suite. I called an all-hands meeting in the warehouse floor of our main distribution hub. I didn't stand on a stage, I stood on a pallet crate, wearing jeans and a blazer, much like my father used to do in the early days. "My father built this place on trust," I told them, "and I know that trust has been damaged lately. You've seen resources diverted. You've seen good people let go. That stops today." I announced the immediate reinstatement of the pension matching program that Ramirez had quietly suspended. The applause that followed wasn't polite, it was relieved. It was the sound of people realizing that the ship wasn't sinking after all. Back at the house, the process was more personal. I hired a team to pack up Ramirez's belongings. We didn't keep anything. The furs, the designer bags, the ridiculous statues, it was all auctioned off, with the proceeds going to the new foundation. One afternoon, while clearing out the master bedroom closet, I found a box tucked away on the top shelf. It was dusty, pushed behind a stack of hat boxes. Inside, I found my father's old journals. Ramirez must have missed them, or perhaps she just didn't care enough to look. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the remnants of her excessive lifestyle, and opened the first volume. The handwriting was shaky toward the end, the result of the tremors he tried to hide. I turned to the entries from the last year. November 14th. She's asking for more money again. She says it's for an investment in a tech startup, but she won't show me the prospectus. I'm tired of fighting. I miss Avery. I tried to call her today, but A said the number was disconnected. I feel so confused lately. Is it the medication? December 3rd. I saw Avery's car parked down the street today. At least, I think it was hers. I wanted to go out, but A said it was too cold and I'd catch pneumonia. She locked the front door. I feel like a prisoner in my own home. I just want to see my little girl. Tears streamed down my face. She hadn't just stolen his money, she had stolen his reality. She had gaslit him into believing I had abandoned him, and she had gaslit me into believing he didn't want to see me. But the final entry, dated just 3 days before his stroke, stopped my breath. January 20th. I know what she is doing. I saw the bank alerts on my old phone, the one she thinks is broken. I know about the gambling. I know I've been a fool. I'm going to call Jacob tomorrow. I have to fix this. I have to protect Avery. If something happens to me, I hope she knows I never stopped loving her. He knew. In the end, he knew. He was fighting back. I clutched the journal to my chest. He hadn't died a victim. He had died plotting his escape. The stroke had beaten him to the punch, but his intent was there. That night, I invited Jacob and Mr. White over for dinner. We sat in the dining room, which I had restored to its original warm oak glory, stripping away the white lacquer Ramirez had favored. I showed them the journal. Mr. White wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. He was a sharp man, your father, even at the end. He was going to call you, I told Jacob. I wish he had, Jacob said, staring at his wine glass. We could have ended it sooner. It ended exactly how it needed to, I said. We protected his reputation. If he had filed for divorce publicly, the scandal would have tarnished the company. By doing it this way, we saved the house of Adams. You saved it, Mr. White corrected. You have his steel, Avery. I didn't see it before, but I see it now. The next morning, I went to the cemetery. The headstone had finally been installed. It was simple, black granite. David Adams. Father. Builder. Visionary. I placed a single white rose on the grass. I found your journals, Dad, I spoke to the wind. You were right, and we won. You can rest now." As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I usually didn't answer those, but something made me swipe right. "Hello? Is this Avery?" A woman's voice, hesitant. "Speaking." "This is the concierge at the Burj Al Arab Hotel in Dubai. We have a guest here, a Miss Ramirez. She listed you as an emergency contact." My blood ran cold. "What happened?" "There was an incident at the casino," the concierge said, lowering her voice. "She attempted to use a line of credit that, well, it didn't exist. There was an altercation. The local authorities are involved. She is demanding we call her daughter to wire bail money." I stood there, the wind whipping my hair across my face. I looked back at my father's grave. I thought about the post-nuptial addendum. I thought about the millions I had already paid to clean up her mess. I thought about the journals. "Ma'am?" the concierge asked. "Are you there?" "I'm here," I said. "Will you be wiring the funds?" I took a deep breath. The air smelled like autumn leaves and freedom. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice steady and cold as the granite behind me. "You have the wrong Avery. I have no relation to that woman." "Oh," the concierge sounded confused. She was quite insistent. She said she's your mother." "My mother is buried in plot 42 of the Willow Creek Cemetery," I said. "Miss Ramirez is a stranger. Good luck." I hung up the phone. I blocked the number. I got into my car, my father's vintage Mercedes, which I had pulled out of storage, and started the engine. It roared to life, a powerful, deep rumble. I drove out of the cemetery gates and didn't look back. The rearview mirror was clear. The road ahead was open. The empire was safe. The debts were paid. And for the first time in a decade, the name Avery Adams belonged solely to me.